Moscow and Kiev have escalated their use of long-range missiles after the United States gave Ukraine approval to use the weapons against Russia. Our next story explains how long-range Western missiles changed the calculus in the region.
The battlefield is ablaze. Ukraine fires Western-supplied long-range missiles deep into Russian territory. Russia responds with a hypersonic strike on Dnipro using its deadly Oreshnik missile. Russia says its air defenses had shot down 8 ballistic missiles fired by Ukraine without saying what kind of missiles were used or where they were shot down. Each missile is dragging the conflict into dangerous new territory. Moscow says the Oreshnik missile isn't just fast, it's unstoppable. It flies at 10 times the speed of sound, carrying multiple warheads to strike separate targets, as seen in this grainy video.
Well, I would say Putin had to somewhat pretend to escalate. However, he's also shown what Russia is still capable of. And so, of course, the Western powers have taken note, even though, of course, the question is, will they try to call his bluff?
More alarming still, Ukrainian intelligence suggests the Oreshnik, which means hazelnut tree, could strike deep into NATO territory, reaching Poland within 12 minutes and the UK within 20 minutes of launch.
It appears dangerous, but I think we should also not let ourselves be intimidated and cowed by these threats from Russia and by its escalatory actions. That's precisely what Putin wants. He wants to really cow the Western countries and the Ukrainians into saying, okay, we give up.
Russia boasts its experimental hypersonic missile cannot be intercepted. Ukraine is worried and is demanding advanced air defense systems from the West to shield itself from Russian missiles. Western nations now face an acute dilemma. While Ukraine urgently seeks advanced air defense systems like Patriot and THAAD, NATO countries hesitate to deploy these sophisticated platforms. Their reluctance stems from concerns about exposing cutting-edge military technology to Russian and Chinese intelligence analysis. Unlike Russia, which flaunts its new weapons, the West traditionally keeps them under wraps. The race to gain a battlefield edge intensifies as both sides prepare for a potential shift in US policy, with Donald Trump's impending inauguration in January. For NATO, this escalation underlines the growing urgency to balance support for Ukraine against the risk of direct confrontation with Moscow. Bureau Report, WION World is One.
Dov Zakheim is a former Under-Secretary of Defense in George W. Bush administration and currently senior advisor at Center for Strategic and International Studies. Is now joining us live from Washington, D.C. Mr. Zakheim, thank you very much for joining us and making time for us. Welcome to the show. How dangerous are these missile games, and what message is Putin trying to send with the deployment of Oreshnik?
Well, obviously, any missile that has the power of what Putin just launched is quite dangerous, as are the ATACMS and Storm Shadows. The ATACMS, of course, is the American system. Storm Shadow is the British system, which have a quite long range and can hit inside Russia. I mean, both of them are very, very dangerous by definition. I think that what one has to consider, first of all, as I believe your Angela Stent, your previous speaker, said, it is critical that Ukraine and the West that's backing Ukraine do not back down. The use of this medium-range ballistic missile, frankly, was there to intimidate Ukraine and, even more importantly, to intimidate the West. After all said and done, Putin, at roughly the same time that the Ukrainians were firing ATACMS for the first time, had signed off on a new nuclear doctrine that essentially said that any kind of serious attack against Russia could prompt a nuclear response. And that, of course, was geared again toward essentially scaring the West away from helping the Ukrainians. But at the end of the day, each time that the United States or its European allies have provided a new capability to Ukraine, the Russians have threatened nuclear response, and it has not happened. And I think Putin fully understands that should he launch any kind of nuclear response, he doesn't know where that might end. Still, it's terribly dangerous, no question about it. But I think both sides are sort of gaming how Mr. Trump might respond. And I'll give you one possibility. Mr. Trump clearly wants to settle this, and I don't doubt that he wants a Nobel Peace Prize for doing it. He could turn around to the Ukrainians and say, if you don't come to the negotiating table, I will not supply you. But at the same time, he could go to Putin and say, if you don't come to the negotiating table, I will supply the Ukrainians with every single thing they want. That might bring them together. So that's one scenario that I think one has to consider. It's not merely that Trump might walk away from Ukraine. And that's terribly important, particularly in the context we're now in, where there's a completely new level of missile exchanges that wasn't there before November.
All right, Mr. Zakhaim, we'll have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your time. Dov Zakhaim is a former Undersecretary of Defense in George W. Bush administration and currently Senior Advisor at Center for Strategic and International Studies. Mr. Zakhaim, thank you.
Thank you for having me.
For all the latest news, download the WION app and subscribe to our YouTube channel.